Well, it was a different kind of week this week. I was inspired with the sermon, and I sat down on Tuesday and ripped it out. One of those sermons that your fingers can't keep up with your mind. And I got done with it, and it was awful. It was awful. I was using the other text. We were looking at Jethro's advice to his son-in-law, Moses, about how to organize and delegate, and I got done with it, and this felt like one of those leadership development training programs at the Sheridan. I mean, to lift up a staff, to train them, to trust them, to delegate, it was awful. So threw that away. And so I turned to the gospel text, and this is the well-known story, parable by Jesus. It goes this way. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that belongs to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his field to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, and here I am dying of hunger? I'll get up and go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him, and filled with compassion, he ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to the slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. And today let us celebrate, and let us kill it and eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I remember when I was in seminary 40 years ago. Sounds like a long time when I say it out loud. There was a lot of conversation about our language and how our language is used in a way that we don't even realize really isolates and excludes half of our population. And so we would sing songs about the sons of God, not realizing that God also has daughters. Or we would talk about the fathers of the faith without acknowledging that mothers have been the ones who have really passed the faith on generation to generation. We use the word man and mankind rather than people in humanity. I don't think it was intentional. In fact, some people thought that it was an all-inclusive term, but it's not. We have words that include all people of the people of God. And so we really worked hard when it came to talking about the people of God to include men and women, sons and daughters. And for that, there wasn't a whole lot of pushback. I think people realized, I guess you're right, our words have betrayed us. But then the conversation went over to God. How do we refer to God? Because a lot of times in the Bible, God is referred to in masculine terms. Even the pronouns a lot of times are God and his people. When Jesus talked about God, most of the time he talked about his Father. And at least one time he used the Aramaic word Abba, which literally means daddy. my daddy. And when he taught his disciples how to pray, he said, pray this way, our Father who art in heaven. Now, Jesus certainly wasn't trying to teach us that God was a man, a male, unlike what Michelangelo painted on the Sistine Chapels of an old man with a gray beard touching Adam's finger. So how do we refer to God? Because certainly there are feminine images as well. Jesus talked about God like a mother hen gathering her brood under her wings. So how do we do this in a way that works? Our Father who art in heaven, those are the words of Jesus. If we say, our Mother who art in heaven, not only is it contrary to the words of Jesus, but then it does become a gender thing. If we say, our parent who art in heaven, well, that becomes a little sterile. And if we say, to whom it may concern, that's just silly. So there might be a little bit of a limit to our vocabulary about how we do it. But nonetheless, what Jesus was teaching and throughout Scripture was not so much the maleness of God, but really talking about the relationship. That this is all about the relationship that God has with us. And if we can convey that with our language, both masculine and feminine issues or images, all the better. But I do realize on this Father's Day that there are those who's going to reach out to their dads today, maybe send a card or have dinner or a phone call. If your dad has died, maybe think fondly of him. But I do realize that there are those for whom Father's Day comes with mixed emotions. Maybe dad was abusive. Maybe dad was absent, physically, emotionally. And so not only is Father's Day difficult, but to speak about God in masculine, fatherly images can be difficult. And I get that. So today, as I turn to this parable of Jesus, he obviously uses this as a way to teach about God's character in terms of a father. Maybe not your father, but he's really talking about in the ideal. In the ideal, this is what a good father looks like. So before I get into the text itself, we have to figure out to whom is Jesus talking. In the very beginning of chapter 15, it begins by saying this. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered. Don't you love that word? They muttered. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So it is to this audience, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, that Jesus addresses his next comments. And he talks about people who are lost. Right in succession, 3 stories about being lost. The first one, a man had 99 or 100 sheep and one wanders away, and most think, well, you still got 99, and they're obedient and they hang around, they're not a problem. But a shepherd doesn't think that way. He leaves the 99 to go find the one who is missing. And when he finds it and brings it home, there's a celebration. Jesus looking at the Pharisees, he's saying some people are like that. They get lost. That is, they wander away. A sheep doesn't wake up in the morning and shake its hoof at the shepherd and say, I'm done here. I want out of here. I'm going out on my own. No. The sheep nibbles a piece of grass there, takes a drink of water there, follows a butterfly here, and suddenly looks up. And they're lost. Where is everybody? Jesus, looking at the Pharisees, says some people are like that. Can you imagine who? It's maybe the kid that grew up in youth group here, goes off to college. They get other interests. They stay out late on a Saturday night. There's not a great church somewhere nearby their campus because they're spoiled of Christ Lutheran. They don't hate Jesus. They just kind of wandered away. Or it's the person during COVID. Locked down for a year and a half, can't go to church. They tried online, it didn't work. Maybe tried to read the Bible. Other things gobbled up Sunday morning time, and pretty soon it's been 2 years I haven't been to church. Again, they haven't given up on Jesus. They've wandered away. They're lost, like a sheep. The second story is about a woman who had 10 coins and she loses one. Well, she still has 9, right? No. She searches the whole apartment until she finds that one. And when she does, there's a party. Jesus, looking at the Pharisees, says some people are like that. They don't wander away. A coin doesn't wander away. A coin doesn't storm off. A coin gets misplaced. Usually by somebody else, right? So it's the kid who grows up in a household with no church talk or environment or participation. She gets to be 21 years old and she realizes she's lost. She didn't wander away, she was misplaced. Or if you're new into a town and you're looking for a church and you're trying to get connected and nothing quite seems to fit, and it's been a year and a half. You haven't wandered away. You've been misplaced. Jesus, looking at the Pharisees, said, some people are like that too. And when they're found, there's a party in heaven. And then he said, there's a third group, and I know you're thinking about the third group mostly, aren't you, Pharisees? The third group is the rebel. It's this boy who says some horrible things to his dad. Give me my inheritance. Which is really saying what? I wish you were dead. There must have been some awful words exchanged, probably building up over time. But Dad, for some reason, does give him his inheritance. He runs away to a foreign town. He's that, now I'm on my own. Now I can make it big. But as the saying goes, a fool and his money are soon parted. He spends it recklessly. This parable is called what? The prodigal son. Do you know what the word prodigal means? You might think it means rebellious, obstinate. The word prodigal actually means spending money or resources freely, recklessly, wastefully, extravagantly. That's what prodigal means. Now, remember that definition because we're going to come back to that. So after spending everything he had, he finds himself homeless, hungry, cold, and he has to hire himself out to the worst possible job of a Jewish boy. He's a servant of pigs. And of course, pigs are the lowest unclean animals on earth, and now he becomes a servant to pigs. He has to walk over there with a white cloth, and he's got the slop, and he pours it in, and would you like red or white with that chicken entrails and rotten vegetables there? He becomes a servant to pigs. It doesn't get any lower than that. And it comes to his senses. He says, how many of my father's hired servants have more food than they can eat? Now notice, he isn't sorry for what he did. He isn't sorry for what he said. This is still self-centered, isn't it? I need to go back to fill my belly is still self-centered. But he comes up with a really good line. Father, I have sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Over and over again, he's walking the long trek home. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. He wants to get it right. He's now barefoot. He's got rags on. He's dirty. He's smelly. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And then, after he's got the wording just right, he gets close enough to the farm, maybe down that long driveway, and Dad sees him. And let's pick up the story from there. And let's count together all that the Father does. But while he was still a long ways off, his father, number one, saw him. That is, he wasn't at his desk. He wasn't out in the field. He wasn't fixing the tractor. He's on the porch. He's been looking out the door, sitting on the porch, looking down the driveway, looking for his boy. He is actively looking. His father saw him and was filled with compassion. Really? Would you? Or would you be there on that porch, letting him walk that long walk up the driveway, getting him on his knees, having him feel that shame, having him get out that confession, and then you say, I'll think about it. Maybe put him on a probation period. No. Filled with compassion. He saw him, filled with compassion. He ran to him. How embarrassing is this? How humiliating is this? The rotten, no good, very bad son is down the driveway, and Dad has to hike up his toga, run down the stairs, screaming like a girl with his arms on my son's back, and he races out to him. How embarrassing is that? But he runs to him, throws his arms around him, a big bear hug, kisses him. He's got to be smelly. He's got to be dirty. It doesn't matter. He's going to put his lips on him. The son gets out the confession. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your... He can't even get it all out. The next phrase is this, but. Dad interrupts his confession. But I've heard enough. You've gone through enough. But the father said to his servant, quick, bring the best robe. Get rid of these rags. Give him the robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger. And not just kind of any ring. This is the family ring. This is the heirloom. This tells the world that you are my son. You belong in the household. Put sandals on his feet. He's barefoot. Put sandals on his feet. And let's kill the fatted calf and have a party. 10 things. 10 things. So just in case you're saying, well, at least he had to return back to his dad. At least he had to say his confession and make sure he was sorry. Do you see how overwhelming? 10 times more things that this father does than what this son does. Overwhelming. It's called the Prodigal Son, right? Tim Keller wrote a book that says it better. The Prodigal God. The prodigal father is a better term for this parable because it is the father who was reckless in his love. It was the father who was extravagant in his mercy. It was the father who spent all of his forgiveness without even a thought. This is not about a prodigal son, is it? It's about a prodigal father, wasteful of his grace and mercy and love. Reason to celebrate? I think so. But not everybody does. Jesus takes a sideways glance over at the Pharisees just to make sure they're tracking and says, but there was one who wasn't happy, the older son, the good son, the one who never went anyplace. He was upset that dad was being so prodigal, so wasteful, extravagant on this rotten, no good, very bad son. Says, you haven't even given me a goat after all I've done for you. I don't even get a goat to celebrate with my friends. And here you're going to bring in that worthless son of yours. It doesn't say my brother. That worthless son of yours. Back into this household just like that. Now, how does the dad respond? My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because, see how he twists it? This brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And that's it. The parable ends right there. And you can see the Pharisees leaning a little forward and saying, well, tell us. Did the older brother go into the party? Did he celebrate? And maybe Jesus says, I don't know. What do you think? I'm not sure if he went in. Would you? Could you? You see, people are lost for a whole lot of reasons. Some wander away, and when they're found, there's a party. And they all come in, and some are misplaced by others, and when they're found, there's a party, and they all come in. And some, as you suggest, are rebellious and obstinate. But when they do come back, can you party with them? Can you celebrate that they've come back? Or are you going to be outdoors? This may not be or describe your dad to a T. But Jesus is talking in the ideal here. And the ideal is God, the Father. The God that is so overwhelming in his response to us. This kid comes up and doesn't even get his confession out. And God overwhelms him with 10 things, pouring out extravagantly all that love. Can you come in if somebody wanders away? Can you come in if somebody is misplaced? The true test, can you come in if the rebel is there and returns? Because here's the thing, there's one more who's lost. And maybe Jesus looks at him again. The worst one who is lost, who has the farthest way back home, is the one who doesn't even know that they're lost. They haven't gone anywhere. They have believed that they're part of the family their whole lives, and they're really not. None of us should be so foolish as to shake our fist with God and say, I want you to be fair with everybody. I want you to be fair with everybody. Give them exactly what they deserve, nothing less, nothing more, starting with me. Because being fair, none of us would stand before a holy and righteous God. God's not fair with us. That should be a bumper sticker. God's not fair with us. He goes 10 times beyond what we do to show that he is the prodigal father who is wasteful with his love and forgiveness. So let's not nitpick about who's in and who's out, who's good enough, who's confessed enough, who feels badly enough to warrant a place in the Father's house. Instead, let's go in and party with a God who is extravagant, even to the Pharisees, and to welcome all into God's family. Does the older son go in? I don't know. You tell me. You're here on Father's Day in the summertime with 100 other places you could go. Will you go in? Amen.